Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart. I am Gabriel Gonsalves, international coach, teacher, and trainer specialized in the field of heart intelligence. I help people create relationships, lifestyles, and careers that they absolutely love. And I do this by showing you how to access your inner resources of love, joy, wisdom, and power that become available to you once you start establishing your connection with your emotional, intuitive, energetic, and spiritual heart. Through individual and group coaching programs, online courses, and live seminars, I teach a wholehearted approach to personal and spiritual development, emotional mastery, and conscious relationship building. Basically, I'm here to help you give birth to the most loving, amazing, powerful, and wise version of yourself. You can find out more about me and the work that I've been called to do in this world by visiting my website, heartintelligencecoach.com, where you can book a session with me or also find out more about my upcoming seminars around the world. Today, I'm broadcasting this episode of Matters of the Heart from the beautiful city of Lisbon in Portugal, home of my Portuguese ancestors. I arrived yesterday after 2 amazing weeks in the island of Madeira and the Azores. I was in the island of São Miguel. And so it's really nice to be in firm land again after all this time. As soon as I arrived yesterday, I went down to by the river and went to the main cathedral, the Cathedral Maggiore Superiore, the big one, the big mother. And I was actually very touched by the simplicity and the beauty of that church. It's very different from the churches in France and in Italy. The Portuguese are, the sense that I got when I was walking into the main cathedral was almost like I was walking into a cave. That's kind of the feeling that I got as I was walking in. It was also at the end of the afternoon, so it was kind of dark, and it was just really beautiful. And after walking the Camino, that's really, I've been sharing this with a lot of my close friends and clients, is I get this feeling that I'm still on pilgrimage, like I'm still in wanting to visit those sacred places that are built by the inspiration of men, and then also out in nature. It's one of the things that the trip to the Azores was really all about. The island of São Miguel, my goodness, if I could probably be a good person to do the tourism promotion for them, but it really is a paradise. It really is a paradise. It's just pristine beauty. I visited some volcanic lakes. I went swimming. But I have to say, my favorite of my entire time there was actually visiting the thermal swimming pools that they have. They have in the town of Furnas, which was right next to where I was staying. They have this beautiful thermal pools. They're called the Aguas of Doña Bella, the beautiful lady. I guess the lady of the beautiful waters. I guess that's really the translation. And literally, they're just like thermal pools after thermal pools where you're there with all these people, and they're open until midnight. So the 2 days that I got to go there, it was actually raining. So imagine late at night, like 11 o'clock at night, you're out, it's raining, and you're in these beautiful pools that have light so you can kind of see. And it's just hot, steaming hot. And you're there connecting with people, talking, but more importantly, you really just get a sense that you're just being washed from the inside out. And so, I felt that the waters were purifying my body, especially after all the walking, all the forgiveness work that I've been doing over the past few weeks. Interesting. Somebody made a comment on one of in the last week's podcast in the YouTube channel. That was obviously we're speaking about compassion last week, which was, as I was defining it, was the ability to be, to feel, to witness, and also to feel somebody else's pain. And this person was speaking to me and letting me know that she was really feeling my pain, and it connected her with her pain. So she wrote me a beautiful message saying, hey, I'm feeling your pain, which is also my pain, and I'm holding the highest possibility for your healing. And so I just want to appreciate that, because this is exactly what this journey, this experience has been for me. It's been profoundly healing. So bathing in those waters of Doña Bella, I literally felt renewed after, after spending all that time in the water. It's very, very, very healing. So today we are talking about boundaries. It's kind of a continuation of the conversation that we began last week about compassion. And if you were not listening to the conversation last week, we were speaking about this idea that a lot of us who are empath, who feel very connected to one another, oftentimes cannot tell the difference between my emotions and somebody else's emotions. Okay. And that the journey in terms of compassion, or the journey of the heart, requires us that we begin to take full ownership of what is really ours and what is not. And the first way that we can begin to do that is by literally taking an inventory. Throughout this whole series, and it kind of began with the very first episode of Matters of the Heart, I began to present you, or offering you, the idea that who you are is like a garden. Your relationships are gardens, right? But the truth is that your life is a garden that at any given time you're cultivating. Life is a garden. Your life is a garden. So I want to continue to sort of pick up on that same idea, or that metaphor. Oftentimes, metaphors allows anybody, most people, to be able to capture or to understand concepts that are very difficult for the rational mind to understand. So I want you to begin to see yourself as a garden, your life as a garden, or with you being the main gardener, the one who's taking care of that garden. And so you have a responsibility, not only to you, to God, to the world, to make sure that you are cultivating the most beautiful, amazing, loving garden, the best version of the garden that you can possibly cultivate. Okay, so the journey then begins before you can even begin to talk about what boundaries are. And we're going to get into that. Don't worry, we will. I have a lot of show notes that I've been taking over the past few days as I've been preparing for this podcast. Is you have to be very clear of what your garden is, what your land is. Just like we build these limit lines, right? Across property lines, homeowners have limited lines. You also have to be able to function in a healthy, harmonious way, to be able to know who you are, where you end, and where somebody else begins. So let's begin first by defining what a boundary is, okay? And it's a definition that it may or may not work for you, but here it goes. Boundaries is anything that you do to draw a physical, mental, emotional, or energetic spiritual line between where you end and others begin. So it's anything that you do to draw some kind of a limit line that lets you and other people know, this is where I end, where my skin, where my thoughts, where my truth, where whatever that is for you, and yours begins. Now, the majority of us struggle making boundaries. I'm going to tell you why. It's so simple. The answer is probably struggling, staring at us right there in the face, and oftentimes wonder why so many situations happen or keep repeating themselves. Let me ask you a few questions. See what do you feel about some of the questions. Can you set these limits or boundaries and still be a loving and spiritual person? Can you have boundaries? Okay, what are some of the boundaries that are valid that you can actually set? What happens if you begin to set boundaries and people begin to be upset or hurt by those boundaries? How do you answer to someone Who wants your time, your love, your energy, or your money? Why do you feel guilty or afraid when you consider setting boundaries? What those boundaries have to do with God's will for your life? And are boundaries selfish? Some questions to think about. Well, those are the questions that I'm going to be doing my best to help you answer today. And what makes for me, and I think for anybody, what makes this topic difficult is that we as human beings, we are relational beings. We are wired for connection. We are wired to be in relationship with one another. And from the very first time that we're born and we're received into this planet, we literally are received into a completely boundless environment. And what I mean by that is, as little children, the nature of our hearts, the nature of our innocence, of our essence is just to be pure love. If you ever picked up a little baby, the baby is just a bundle of just loving and receiving love. It feels like it's part of one with everything, with everyone. And at the very beginning cannot really tell the difference, according to what our scientists tell us, between where it ends and where other people begins. Right? As the capacity to reason and the little child begins to develop his brain and his cerebral frontal cortex and begins to be able to have the capacity to reason, to analyze, it begins to understand that I'm separate from other people and my thoughts are separate from other people. Yet at the very same time, there is this innate wisdom or knowing that I'm also connected, that there is an aspect of myself that is boundless, because the spirit is boundless. And it is through our hearts that we're able to establish that kind of a connection. So the awareness then, or the way that we begin to move forward in life is then beginning to have is the capacity to understand that I am here, I am a separate being. My skin separates me from the rest of the world, right? The skin, the largest organ that we have, that you have, separates you from the rest of the world and other people. Your thoughts separate you, right, from other people. You think different than me. Your feelings also separate you from other people. You could be having one feeling experience. I could be having a different experience. Distance can separate you from other people. So many things can separate you from other people, but there is an aspect of ourselves, a more contextual, energetic, spiritual aspect, where we're always connected, where we're always not only connected, but we're influencing one another, and we're also ultimately one. So the trick when it comes to this topic of boundarying is understanding that we are physical beings, human beings, but we're also having a spiritual experience. So we are separated beings, but we're also having an experience of connection and oneness. And that's what I believe makes this topic so complicated and so complex for the majority of us. So can you set limits and still be loving and a spiritual person? Well, of course. You have to. Not only you have to, it's necessary for your survival, and you owe it to yourself to be in this world and to know the limitations of physicality, and that your garden, that you have a garden to take care of, and that's your body, that's your heart, right? That is your livelihood, that is your well-being. But at the same time, you exist in relationship with other people with whom you share a commonality, common human experience. And not only that, with whom we're ultimately one at the level of the spiritual. Now, what is in essence the way in which we draw boundaries? Well, simply by saying no. By saying a line, whether if it's a physical line or an imaginary line or one that is spoken, is ultimately just your willingness, my willingness to simply say, no, I don't want this. This is not good for me. This is not what I want. This is not my truth. This is not what I need. All right. Which is one of the reasons why many of us struggle saying no. No to things that oftentimes could actually even be good for us. And we'll speak about that in just a moment. Because it is the word no in itself, it has a tendency in our society in which we live to be a confrontational confrontational word. As little children, every time I was at the supermarket today, went to get some stuff for breakfast and for the next few days. And there was this probably 9-10-year-old kid, and he was really excited. He came up to his mom. It's like, "Mom, buy me this chips that he wanted, potato chips." And right away, the mom in Portuguese, she's like, "No, I não comprar isso. No, no, no." And you could see immediately the kid just went like, he just closed down. He got angry. There was a sense of shame, anger. And right away, he went, put it back in the shelf where it belonged. And that is one of the things that begins to happen the moment that you, or anybody begins to say no. We are going to inconvenience people. We're going to make people angry. We're going to upset somebody. And that is one of the things that the majority of us who are empaths struggle with, because we feel so deeply other people's emotions. We don't want to say no. And then also because deep down, we hold the belief that because we're loving, open people and understand the nature of our spiritual connection, that we want to love everybody, that we want to say yes to everybody, that we want to give our time, our love, our energy to anybody. But the problem with that is that it's built upon an erroneous, assumption, right? And it's the assumption that everybody's like you, when the truth is the majority of the world is not like you. Majority of the world is not operating at that same level of unconditional love that you are operating from. The majority of the world is not going to really appreciate that. Not only that, but when you begin to ask yourself the place from which you're giving, more often than not, you're really authentic and real with yourself. You're not really truly giving from a place of love. The majority of us are giving from a place of actually, because we don't feel love, because we feel, or I feel that if I give you my time, my love, my energy, my healing, whatever it is, you're going to validate me. You're going to love me back. You're going to appreciate me. Leading us to what the majority of us experience as looking for love in all the wrong places. It's sort of the case of women who love too much, who give too much. All right. So have you ever been in a relationship where you were the one that primarily was just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and feel like you were not getting anything back? You literally exhausted yourself from giving so much. And then you felt completely unappreciated by the other person. Well, the truth is that when I've done that in my life, when I really have done some soul searching and gotten really real with myself and really examined my motivations, I realized that I was actually giving from a place of shame. What I mean by that is that somehow I did not feel worthy of love. And so I overgave, because somehow by overgiving, see the dynamic in that sense, the way I experienced it kind of works like this. I give you, or I do something for you in order to like you, because I love you, I care about you. And then you don't respond, or you do respond. And so it creates a little bit of sense of like, oh, wow, this person, I did this and I received some love from this person. So let me do it again. And then let me do it again. And let me give some more. Maybe I'll give some more, I'll get some more love. And then little by little, you get into sort of a game with yourself, really using this other person to find out how lovable you are. Ultimately depleting yourself, because you're really giving not from a place of unconditional love. You're not really giving from an overflow. You are giving from wanting to be validated. So what is the solution then? Well, you need to begin then by understanding that setting limitations, being able to say no, right? It's an important part of your spiritual path. Think of it as the path, whatever path that you're walking towards, whatever a destination will oftentimes give you many alternatives, or will have many detours, will have also many distractions. And to stay on this path, you're going to have to say no to a lot of offers, no to a lot of things that are needing your attention, that want your love, that want your energy, that want your money. Okay. And for you to stay on this path, ultimately, you're going to have to surrender all of that. which is not really getting you to your destination. So you owe it to yourself to begin to grow in your ability to be both a human being, loving spiritual person, but at the same time, be able to say no. When something is not in your highest interest, when something is not in alignment with your truth, when something is hurting you, depleting you, taking away from you, distracting you, whatever that may be. Okay, so in those cases, it's very legitimate that you establish and you set up some boundaries. Okay, knowing that when you're the one that's used to giving all the time, where you are taking oftentimes responsibilities for things that are not yours, for somebody else's healing, for somebody else's well-being, where you become, where you're taking responsibilities for things that are not really your business, that are not your problem. The moment that you begin to say no, or other people begin to say no, it's going to bring up some guilt, shame, resentment, anger in both you and the other person. Okay. Again, that's one of the reasons why the majority of us struggle. So how do you go about then and set up some boundaries? And what does it actually mean in terms of setting up a boundary? Well, again, just as homeowners set some kind of a physical property line around their land, you also need to be able to set up a mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual boundary for your own life, okay, to help you distinguish between what is yours, what is not, what belongs to you, what belongs to somebody else. Where do you end? Where does somebody else begin? Okay, and some of the ways in which you can do this is you can do this physically. For example, remember some people, for example, have very touchy. I come from a culture where we're very huggy and we're very kissy and we love a lot of affection. And people, for example, who have been sexually abused early in life, they grow up with very little sense of boundaries around their skin and their physicality. Okay, so not everybody have the same kind of a tolerance in terms of limitations that we place upon our skin and our bodies. Okay, so have you ever been, for example, into a situation where somebody's touch is uncomfortable, or where just the close proximity to somebody just feels uncomfortable, but you're unwilling to say no because you don't want to hurt them? Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. So if you're not really aware of your energetic space, which is where all begins, then how can you then begin to say no or begin to differentiate between what is your space and what is somebody else's space? So one of the ways we do this is by literally telling somebody who makes us feel uncomfortable, how they touch us, that is not okay to be hugged, to be kissed, to be whatever, caressed in that way. And by the way, this is if you have that kind of a problem. When I was in Madeira, Horacio, the man that owns the hotel where I was staying at, there was a moment where I hugged him and I kissed him, and I could tell he was like uncomfortable with it. For me, it's a natural way of being, and I was expressing my love. And then right away after I let him go and I could feel his his discomfort, he said to me, well, this is uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to hug you back anyway. But he hugged me anyway. He was like laughing. But we were laughing. I think it's just because of this. It's just human nature. It's just human nature to have the kind of physical boundaries. The question again, or what I'm trying to get at, is that, literally the physical boundaries begin at the level of your skin. Now you can use a boundary just using your words by just simply saying, no, this is not okay with me. Your behavior is not okay with me. I don't like to be treated this way. I don't like it when you do this. If you do this, I'm going to do this. You can actually speak about the consequences of setting up some kind of a boundary, and then that limitation not being respected by the other person. Okay. Just to give you an example, I have a person in my life, or used to be in my life. She's not in my life anymore. At least not interpersonally. Who used to just constantly just give me channels from spirit or from entities, and just telling me like unsolicited wisdom and guidance that I don't really know where it came from. And it was constantly unsolicited, just like channeling. And I would constantly say to her, listen, I'm not really interested in receiving this kind of information and feedback. Where is it coming from? Right? Because that's the thing. You don't really always know where's the source of this information. So I asked her to please just keep that to herself, but she kept emailing me and she kept wanting to at every moment just like give me this information, which was unsolicited advice. So have you ever been in a situation like that, for example, where somebody just keeps telling you things that they're not necessarily things that you don't want to hear? Because I do acknowledge that there's important information and feedback that we can receive, but often, more often than not, when it's disguised as a channeling or something from another being or unsolicited advice, it violates. I believe that I, as a human being, I have not only the responsibility, but I have the power to choose what kind of information do I want to receive from people. It's one of the things that I teach my coaches in my coach training program is how to give feedback to another person. And one of the frameworks I teach is asking the person, right? Hey, can I offer you some advice? Can I share with you a dream that I had last night? Can I share with you my experience with regards to the same situation? And then you wait for the other person to consent and say, yes, of course, I'm happy to receive that. But oftentimes when people are just pouring out all this information, which again, it's coming from a place of uncontrollable giving. Some people, they just want to give everything that's in their mind, everything that shows up. Okay. But you have the right at any time to take full power and give consent to what is that it's being sent in your direction, and not just from people, right? Every website that you visit, every place that you visit, every food that you put into your body that does not serve you, makes you feel sluggish, makes you sick, makes you fat, whatever that is, right? You can say no. I mean, that is one of the ways in which boundaries are applied. Another way in which you can state a boundary is by just simply stating the truth about who you are, the truth about what you can do and what you cannot do, the truth about what you want, what you need, right? It's, this is where the metaphor of the garden really comes into play. If you're very clear, for example, with regards to who you are, which means what kind of garden are you, right? What kind of garden you are, which is also like what kind of relationships are you interested in cultivating? What kind of plans do you want to have? This morning I went to visit, I'm staying in a part of Lisbon called Ajuda. They had the beautiful botanic garden of Ajuda, literally just at my doorstep. And when I went in there, it's just like you see this beautiful manicure shapes and forms that they built. And so you could see that the architect, whoever designed that garden, had something very clear, specific with regards to what it was that they wanted. They knew what that botanical garden is going to look like, what it's about, what plants belong in there, and what they don't. Okay? And so being able to create that, to manifest that, also meant having to say no to a lot of things. No to a lot of things. I mean, you just don't let any plant just grow in whatever shape and form they want to, right? So same thing with your life. Once you know what kind of a garden you are, what kind of relationships you want to have with people, right? The moment you said, for example, this I learned from Jennifer Hoffman, a wonderful spiritual teacher. And she talks about it in the context of creating what she calls energetic boundaries, using the power of words. The moment you decide, for example, that you want to have people in your life who love, honor, and respect you, right? That moment you begin to set a very powerful energetic boundary around what kind of a person you want to have in your life, as friends, as a lover, as a partner, as a client, whatnot. And at the moment where you begin to see people in your life who are treating you without love, not honoring you, not respecting you, okay, then you owe it to yourself to tell that person, hey, the way you're behaving, what you're doing is not okay with me. I don't like it. Okay. And you can, just like, just like referees in a soccer game, you can warn people and say, hey, you keep doing this thing and I don't like it. If you do this again, I'm not going to have you in my life. I mean, it's really interesting, but like you see the younger generations is like, they delete each other from WhatsApp, from their cell phones and whatever, but you could literally do that. It's part of setting up boundaries and basically telling somebody like, hey, the example that I was given earlier about the person that just kept giving me all these unsolicited channels. The reason she's no longer in my life is because I said to her, hey, don't want to receive this kind of messages from you. I'm not interested. Basically, I don't feel like I'm being honored. When you ask something from somebody, you basically telling the person, hey, I don't like to be treated that way. Okay. And they constantly dishonoring you. They're not really respecting what you requested from them. You owe it to yourself to remove yourself from that situation. Okay. So speaking your truth about who you are, knowing who you are and what you are not, knowing what is it that in a relationship you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. What is a deal breaker? Like all those things allow you to have the level of clarity to know what kind of a garden you want to cultivate. Who do you want to be? And then it makes it a lot easier to be able to say no, which again, doing so will inevitably bring up some anger in the other person and some guilt and shame. That's one of the things. If you're experiencing guilt and shame, the moment you begin to say no, I have a lot of clients that the moment we start talking about the topic of boundaries and how to set boundaries and all of that, the first thing that comes up is that they begin to say, oh my God, I feel so guilty that I cut this person from my life. I feel so guilty that I told them I don't love them. I feel so guilty that I told them I don't want to ever see them again. I feel so guilty because deep down, as I said, we're all wired for connection. And deep down, we know that we are connected and that we want to love everybody. But at the same time, in this linear world in which we live, in this physical world in which we live, in which we are here to create, you also have the sovereign right to choose what to allow into your experience and what not to allow into your experience. To choose not only who you want to be, but who do you want to be with? Who do you want to share this path with? Okay, so at any given time, you can do that. So it's normal, the guilt and shame. What you're really feeling, in my experience, is the accumulation of all the guilt and shame that you did not express as a child when your parents told you to do something and you knew you did not want to do it, but you were forced or you were shamed into doing it. I remember very clearly my nephew, Gabriel, when he was probably about 3-4 years old. I remember my sister, I came in and, he was like misbehaving, and my sister got really angry at him because I walked in and he was like, like he did not want to say, I love you to me, basically. And so she was like, tell him you love him. He's your uncle. You're supposed to love him. And he's like, I don't want to, And so she just started like shaming him. It's like, how could you know he's your uncle and blah, blah, blah. Until the poor kid just kind of went like, okay, I love you. But I could sense, that at that moment, he was angry. He was hurt with his mom. There was something else that was happening. But he was forced to say something which he did not really feel or mean at that moment out of shame. Okay? Shame is in that kind of says that if you don't do this, then I will remove my love for you. You won't be worthy of my love. So there's that kind of a saying. So like sometimes we keep engaging in relationships, and many times in abusive relationships, because somehow we feel like if we don't, right, we won't be loved. God will remove its love from us, or the other person stop loving us, or whatever. Okay, so if you're experiencing guilt, if you're experiencing shame, the moment you begin to set some boundaries and say no to other people, more often than not, it's a sign that you're learning how to, for the first time in your life, set some healthy boundaries, okay? It's part of it. So what do? You just give yourself permission to feel it, surrender that shame. And you're going to notice that when you really surrender that shame, what it begins to replace it is that sense of being more in power or in control of your own life. Right? So expressing your truth of who you are, expressing, which is ultimately what integrity is about, verbally by saying no, or sometimes through some kind of an action. I mean, if you tell somebody the way you're behaving is not okay with me, if you keep doing this, I am going to remove you from my life. And then suddenly, okay, they keep acting the same way. And the next thing you do is like, you don't reply to any messages. You're not available to them physically over the phone or anything. You literally remove them from your life. At that moment, you have made a very clear, powerful expression of the word no through your actions. And more often than not, people will eventually get that, and it will inevitably, as I was saying earlier, bring up a tremendous amount of anger in other people. That's what boundaries do, is one of the reasons why many of us avoid them. Okay. Why is that? Well, more often than not, what's happening is that you are letting those people now, when you remove your energy from the situation, what you're doing them is now they're being confronted with themselves, with the part of themselves that they were projecting onto you, which obviously will also leave you also with the part of them that is you that you were projecting onto themselves. Okay, that's, for example, men and women who give too much. That's one of the things that happens. Okay, once that person you've been giving and over giving to is not there, what do you have left? Well, you have that part of you that feels alone, that feels ashamed, that feels unworthy of love. Right now, you can begin to heal that aspect of yourself, which is why more often than not, setting up a boundary means also setting up some kind of a geographical distance, which basically means removing yourself physically from a situation, from a person or a thing. Okay, creating a boundary so that you can replenish yourself, so that you can look things from a different perspective, like physically renew yourself, emotionally, spiritually, even if you have to, especially if the relationship or the situation has been draining and somewhat abusing. Okay. It's one of the ways in which you can do that. You can also set up a boundary by taking time off of a person, of a project. More often than not, taking time off from something that you're confused about. And again, it could be a project, could be a person, could be a relationship. Okay, will more often than not will help you regain ownership. Think of it when I was flying over the Azores. You could see all this delineations and a line where basically the farmland is distributed. But when you're in the field, it's very hard to kind of see where your boundary is, especially if there's not a physical fence. Okay, so more often than not, taking time from a particular relationship or situation, especially one where there's been a lot of, there's been emotionally consuming and draining, will allows you to gain some perspective, to ultimately begin to see the situation from a different perspective, so that you can see, then begin where you have been overgiving, where you have been giving up too much or whatnot. Okay, so you could take emotional distance also to protect your heart. How many times have you been in a situation where you're very vulnerable, yet at the same time, maybe the other person needs your help, they need your support, and we as very heart-centered people who are empathic, don't want to say no because we want to love everybody. Okay, and so taking that emotional space, it's very important. Last week, I remember one of you asked me a question about emotional, not emotional, compassion, burnout. Okay, well, one of the reasons I believe that some of us may suffer from emotional or compassion burnout is because you're constantly giving, and you're not really taking the time to replenish yourself emotionally. Okay, which is what the work around the heart, connecting with a higher source of love, will ultimately do. All right, so you owe it to yourself then to be able to stand in your own truth about who you are, what is right for you, what is it you want, what is it you need for your life, and begin to physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally begin to basically draw some lines so that you can love and limit at the same time. You can love and limit. I remember what's his name? Cesar Millan, the dog trainer, the dog whisperer. It's I used to watch his shows a lot when I was living in LA, because there's a lot of spiritual principles that he uses when he teaches. And so one of the his motto is exercise, discipline, and love. And he says love always comes last. because discipline is an expression of love. So ultimately it's all an expression of love. But this is his reasoning. Exercise, which means there's some kind of a practices, that there's a routine. I'm constantly exercising my body. So I'm exercising my capacity to be aware of my emotional body, my mental body, my physical body, exercising my dominion, power over myself. And then there is discipline. And the discipline, again, it's one of the ways of just simply learning how to put some boundaries or limitations in what we do. Because again, it's the paradox is that we're in a world, but we're in this world, but we're not of this world. So we come from a limitless, yet we live in a limited world, which is true in a nonlinear causal world, in a level of the physicality of this physical reality. And then lastly, love. Okay. So what do you do with all of this that I just shared with you? Well, what I want to do, which is why I did not do the beginning guided process, is to guide you through a process to strengthen your own truth, and your capacity to love yourself. Your capacity to love yourself so that you can stand in the level of clarity, level of compassion, being able to surrender any guilt that you may have about setting up boundaries, so that you can honor your own garden, so that you can honor that part of you that is both human and divine. Okay, so let me take you through it. I want you to begin by just placing a hand over your heart. And as you do this, just begin to breathe deeply in and out of the heart. Imagining that you're breathing straight into the heart. Breathing slower than you normally would, deeper than you normally would, and beginning to establish a sense of an even pattern so that the inhale and the exhale are approximately the same length. And as you breathe, just become aware of the space around you. See yourself beyond your physical skin as also the energetic space around you. If you could stretch your arms in every direction like the Vitruvian man that Leonardo da Vinci drew. If you could see yourself surrounded by like an egg-shaped energy field that expands about 3 feet in every direction around you, where your heart is the source of that field, the center organizing that entire field, or the place out of which that field is emanating from. Can you become aware of the thoughts that are moving in there, in that experience? Can you become aware also of the physical sensations that you're experiencing in that space. And the feelings that also all moving in that space. Aware that in this space, this energetic field that surrounds you, that is you, for you are that space. In that space, there is a mind and an ego that takes positions, that is here to help you survive, to help you identify with things, with people, with forms. But that at the same time, you are more than just that ego, that personality, that mask, all those beliefs. Yet you are also more than all these physical sensations that your physical body is experiencing. And that you're also more than all those emotions that you might be feeling. You're more than the guilt and shame you might feel. You're more than the love, than the peace that you might feel. But you are just this container. And that container is your inner garden. It contains your dreams, your aspirations. It contains a life that you're creating right now. It contains that part of you that is in relationship with other people. As you breathe into that space, say to yourself inwardly, this is my garden. This is my kingdom of heaven. This is the energetic space, the physical, mental, emotional space in which I am living, breathing, and having my being. And the well-being, the beauty of this space, my number one priority. This is my inner garden. Now say to yourself, I now choose to own this inner garden. Remember that, yes, you are approximately connected with the aspect of yourself that is immediately surrounding your physicality. But that this part of yourself, through your heart, it's ultimately connected to the infinite because it is limitless. That you are both a human being having this physical, mental, emotional experience in this planet, yet at the same time, you are connected to the source of infinite love, wisdom, power, and that you're both, that you exist in those two dimensions. Breathing it all and aware that you are connected to all, yet at the same time, you are here, that you are a drop in the ocean, yet at the same time, part of a larger ocean. But that as a drop, you are responsible for the well-being of that drop. You are responsible for the purity of that drop. You are responsible for the well-being of that drop. Now, when you take a moment to just bring the feeling of appreciation for this space around you, an immediate space around you. That is what some people may refer to as your energetic field, your aura, your ethereal body. Some people will have different names for this. And the idea is we're not going to here follow into some kind of a debate as to what it actually is. All we're doing is just aware that we are just this container space in which all these things are moving. And that we have there's this part of us that exists in the linear world. There's a part of us that also exists in the limitless. So we feel appreciation for the space in which all of this is evolving. And as you continue to feel this love and appreciation, allow the following words to be received in your heart. So we attune and connect to the infinitely love, wisdom, and power from the heart of the cosmos, from the heart of our Father and Mother God, from the central sun. And declare that we are one with the love, the wisdom, and the power of the heart of God right here and right now. Embracing the fullness of our humanity and the fullness of our spirituality, understanding that we are both human and divine. Choosing to bring now more of the qualities of the divine into our hearts as the capacity to love, accept, and feel compassion for ourselves. To stand in our own truth about who we are. It is in this spirit, it is in this nature of knowing who we are. In essence, that we are now reclaiming our power to take full and complete ownership of our energetic, emotional, physical, and mental space. Now that we are worthy of love just for who we are, that there's no need to overgive, to overextend ourselves. That there's no need to try to seek something from outside which is not already from within us. That we are right here, right now, taking full and complete ownership of our kingdom of the heart, of our heartlands. Taking full responsibility for the well-being, the safekeeping of our hearts, even if that requires saying no to what is not in alignment with our truth, not in alignment with our highest aspirations, not in alignment with our highest vision for ourselves. Saying no to ourselves and others without any guilt or shame. For it is our divine right to act in the same name and nature as God and be creators or co-creators with the divine. Standing in our own truth, speaking it without any hesitation and with love and respect for our fellow human beings. Knowing that within us there is the wisdom and the capacity to remove ourselves from any situation, person, or thing that is no longer serving us, that is not honoring us, that is not respecting us, or is not helping us grow and evolve. That we are worthy of being loved, that we are worthy of being loved, honored, and respected. That the Christ within us is worthy of being loved, honored, and respected. That we don't need to prove anything to anybody, to ourselves, or even to God. That we are lovable exactly as we are. That with the same love and compassion in which we are saying no to others and ourselves, we're also willing to receive the no of others and beginning to see that there is no rejection, but just simply a deep honoring of other people's path, of other people's energetic consent. That just like we have the power to create ourselves, to create our path, to define ourselves, others have that same right. Therefore, we easily, effortlessly, and joyfully release others from having to fulfill our expectations, from having to respond to our love. We release them, letting them go, seeing them with the eyes of compassion, blessing them along the way. Knowing that we're always connected, no matter what. At any time that we take emotional, physical, mental distance from one another, from a project or for something which confuses us, we always remain connected as one in the heart, no matter what. That even if that person that we are releasing or creating a boundary around or choosing to move forward, choosing to say no to, even if we never see them again in this physical reality, we do continue and shall continue to be connected through the heart of God. As we forgive ourselves, forgive them, and receive the forgiveness for all of life, for judging ourselves, for judging them, restoring once again the peace within our own hearts. Knowing that when a gardener cuts a flower, removes a plant from his garden, it does it out of love for the garden itself. Therefore, when we remove ourselves from a situation, a person, or a circumstance, or something that is no longer serving us, that is harming us, that is not supporting, nurturing us, respecting, honoring us, we do so out of self-love and compassion. And that we, as the Christ within us, is also the shepherd of our thoughts, the shepherd of our feelings, our emotions, the shepherd of every project, every vision, every dream that we have. And therefore, just like a shepherd takes care of his sheep, we are also taking care of ourselves, our flock, becoming stewards of what is ours by divine right, this life and the potentiality given to us by the divine. Today, individually and as a group, we stand on this truth. Give thanks for this awareness. We give thanks for our ability to know that at any given time, we have the power to love and set limits at the same time. To be spiritual beings, yet be human beings. And that is out of love for myself and others that I give to others that belongs to them. Their light that they have projected onto me, their fears that they have projected onto me, their darkness that they have projected onto me, as I now take full ownership for all of those things that I have equally projected onto others. Aware that in my heart it is all transmuted and it is all serving the highest good of all of life. As we begin to close or to bring this meditation to a close, I want you to bring up an image of yourself as a baby. It's a tiny little baby. Imagine you're holding the 3-year-old version of yourself in your hands. And as you hold this baby close to your heart, remember the following words. This baby, this innocent version of yourself, is the only thing that you are responsible for. You're not responsible for other people. Each and every person in this lifetime is here to take full and complete ownership and responsibility for their own emotional well-being. And that though you may have pledged or made agreements to be responsible to someone, that ultimately, your primary responsibility is for this heart of yours, this innocence, this aspect of yourself that is here, alive, dreaming, creating a life, choosing to experience the fullness of life and to grow here. In your capacity to be more loving, more giving, more creative, and to know yourself as God. You're not responsible for other people's growth. You're not responsible for other people's well-being. You may choose to pledge, commit to a particular aspect of supporting another person, but that ultimately you cannot do for other people what is only for them to do. You can only do for you what is for you to do. And out of love for yourself, for them, and for God, you release others so that they do what only they can do. Now bring this inner child or this baby, kiss him, and then bring him back into your heart and allow it to merge with the totality of oneness with your being. All right. How is this for you? How are you feeling right now? What are you moving with right now in your awareness? What are some of the new thoughts, ideas, or things you're taking away from today's session? I don't know about you, but just me guiding you through this experience, it brought a tremendous amount of, just love for this aspect of myself. See, when I connect with this aspect of myself that I know is my primary responsibility, and I make a decision to say no to someone outside or no to something outside of myself, there's no shame. There's no shame. Because I know I'm doing it out of love for myself. It is out of love for myself that I'm removing from a particular situation. It's out of love for myself that I'm not eating this food. It's out of love for myself that I'm not allowing this person to give me unsolicited advice, information. It's out of love for myself that I'm saying no. Rather say no, that then experience the pain, the confusion, or the hurt that can come as a result of doing that. It's out of love for myself that I say no. It's out of love for me and for God and for God's vision and will for my life that I say no. It is so that I reach my final destination along the path that I say no to all the detours and all of that, which is not the path. All right, we have come to the end of our show. I hope that what you have learned here today, or remembered, rather, will support you in creating deeper, more loving relationships with yourself, with others, and other aspects of life. Remember that ultimately there's no such a thing as mind over matters of the heart, for the heart is ultimately the source of your love, wisdom, and power that will always, no matter what, win. That whenever you make these decisions, taking into consideration this innocent child that lives within you and its well-being, every time that you do that, you are honoring the divine, limitless aspect of yourself that is connected to all of life, because it is all of life. Yet at the same time, you're also honoring your humanity. Remember that if you want some extra support by having a session with me, you can always go to my website, heartintelligencecoach.com, where you can also read up about my latest blog posts and then also find out about my upcoming seminars. Okay? Until the next time, take care of yourself. Remember, you have the power to say no at any given time. In fact, get used to saying no, probably a little bit more, and make it an exercise to start saying no a little bit more often. And remember that you are loved no matter what. And on that note, I send you all of my love too. Bye-bye for now.